One of the only other premium subscriptions that I have is to theathletic.com, which is a fantastic website. We have a lot of their writers on very frequently. One that really wanted to have on because of his coverage of all this from the beginning, Stewart Mandel of The Athletic joins us now. And Stewart, I'm going to get this out of the way right now because a lot of people have asked me about it, but you tweeted earlier about freezing cold takes coming at you, and you put up the mailbag where you had backed off those comments. So it has been kind of a long, strange journey in this realignment, but just curious about having to have a lot of like grace and a little bit of rubber skin when it comes to that when you know all this went down the last couple of days.
I mean, I don't have any problem ever admitting when I wrote something that turned out to be wrong. And you know, you mentioned a tweet where I actually linked to a mailbag I wrote in November of last year, well before this Colorado thing. I mean, this all dates back to a story in the summer of 2021, right after OU Texas, where I crunched some TV data. And the mistake I made was trying to project, okay, based on this TV data, here's how much money they can expect to make. It was totally off base. It was totally wrong. So again, like acknowledge that in November, right after the Big 12 announced this deal. To your point, what's a little bit rough is then you have to go through all that all over again. Like it was cold take that day, and now it's being cold take all over again because of Colorado. But look, you know, some writers or Skip Bayless, like just dig in. If I got it wrong, I got it wrong.
So this all went down, and like I was reading your column the other day about this and how the Pac-12 got here. When you were observing this, covering the Pac-12, when did you start to see the shift in where they had started to veer down the wrong path? Where you mentioned in your article, this is the worst team in their league that they lost, and they couldn't even make them happy.
I mean, they started to veer down the wrong path 2 years ago when they had a chance to take some Big 12 teams during that period of instability and decided they were good where they were at. There have been a lot of other mistakes along the way, but I can't emphasize enough that even though it's been no secret for 13 months that the Big 12 coveted those those Four Corners schools, and Colorado in particular, at some point, March-ish, maybe a little later, it kind of went from there after the Four Corner schools to Colorado is the one most likely to go. Despite all of that, I do genuinely believe George Payoffkoff thought they were past that. The deal is almost done. It's going to be a good deal. Everybody's committed. You saw the comments at Pac-12 Media Day. You know, their patience is about to be rewarded. And so for Colorado to turn around, you know, less than a week after he made those comments at Media Day and do it, it's just such a terrible look. They look weak. They look unprepared. It's yet another case of the Big 12 and Brett Yormark outmaneuvering George Payoffkoff, starting with jumping the line on the TV deal. It's been one thing compounded after another. It's not all on George Payoffkoff. Larry Scott started them down this road with a lot of bad with the Pac-12 network. But I think he deserves the blame for not getting this deal done in time to keep, like you said, the team's actually been the worst team in football in their conference, to keep them from jumping, and in doing so, putting the whole conference on the brink.
Stewart, the Big 12 was dead to rights a couple of years ago after the Oklahoma and Texas announcement, and it seemed like, you know, it was going to be everybody scrambling for life jackets. Instead, the schools that remained or were going to remain all stuck together, and that's what the Pac is having to do right now, the Pac-9, and you just have to trust that everybody is going to stay on board, which is probably the most difficult thing because you know that everybody's also looking out for their best interest. And somehow, probably because, yes, there wasn't a lot of landing spots for Big 12 schools, they were able to stick it out. But if you had been told that not only were they going to stick it out, but they were going to add the 4 schools they did, and then they were going to add Colorado another year later and be in the position now where they are, just what all do you attribute that to? Brett Yormark, I guess, loyalty within the conference, and how surprised are you that we are here where we are with the Big 12 now?
Well, let's go back to Bob Bowlesby. And
sure.
You know, after that initial, you know, remember him going to the state legislature and saying that we're going to lose 50% of the value. Like that, honestly, at first contributed to the sense that everything was going to fall apart. But then, to his credit and to the president's credit, he made some very good choices in terms of getting BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. And so just going out and getting remember, for a decade, the Big 12 just refused to expand. They were 10. We're good at 10. And look what happened, right? So they went big. They got those 4 schools. That helped bring stability. Then, right, I mean, the Big 12 current TV deal doesn't end until 2025. And Brett Yormark convinced ESPN and Fox to let them go ahead and renegotiate it in 2022. And that's the ultimate stability. We know what our TV future looks like. We're not in the place that the Pac-12 is, where they're in this, endless negotiations and nobody knows how much money they're going to make. And so I feel like the Pac-12 is almost doing everything that the Big 12 did in the exact opposite. They it's not the wrong instinct to go to the open market. In TV deals, you're generally going to get more money if there's more bidders. Unfortunately for them, they did it at like the worst possible time, when ESPN and Disney are going through this kind of reining back in their spending. But the thing that's puzzling me the most right now is he just continues to be so adamant they have to get the TV deal done first, and then they'll talk about expansion. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's not what the Big 12 did. They got their lineup so that they went to ESPN and Fox. They knew, those partners knew exactly which schools they're getting. And some of those schools, BYU is had an ESPN deal since they became an independent. Cincinnati went to the playoff, right? So that helped them in their TV negotiations. The Pac-12, I personally believe, and others I've talked to who actually do this for a living, TV negotiations, don't understand why they don't just go out and add, 2 schools, if not more, tomorrow. And that if they believe those schools would actually help the value of the TV deal.
Stewart, you mentioned that they're kind of doing it all in reverse of the Big 12. And why not just copy what was working for them? Did they just not grasp the reality of their situation that well?
They definitely didn't grasp it in 2021. Now, one kind of story that gets lost or maybe hasn't been totally told is that I do think there were people in the Pac-12 and possibly even the commissioner that did want to add Big 12 teams that year. And Carol Folt, the president of USC, is the one who shot it down. And then she turns around and leaves a year later. So, I mean, the notion that they could have stopped USC and UCLA from going to the Big Ten is not realistic. They were gone. But everything since then, it's just, I don't know, it's just 2 different personalities, 2 different commissioners with 2 very different personalities. Honestly, some of the stuff Brett Yormark has put out there didn't seem realistic. Getting Colorado was a bit of a vindication for this idea that he could, go out and sell the conference and get a Power 5 school, any Power 5 school, to come. And now we're going to find out if that has a domino effect. I think they've felt for a while Colorado was the most open to it. I mean, certainly the fact that they used to be in the conference is a big deal. That they're the most receptive. And that if they got them, maybe that opens the door to Arizona. I don't think it goes beyond that at this point. I think the Utah and ASU conversations ended along. But, now that Colorado actually made it's one thing to talk about it. It's another when you actually see a school make the jump. Does that influence Arizona's thinking?
Stewart, that's I guess the $1 million question. Now, they had their meeting last night. It seems like Oregon State had their statement, but again, what are Oregon State's options here? Really, is it as simple as just, hey, let's go grab the Aztecs, let's go grab the Ponies, add the Texas market, we got SoCal back, and everything's rosy and fat and happy again?
Nothing's ever simple in the Pac-12. And I say that because as of media day last Friday, from the conversations I had, there were 2 schools. I don't feel like I have it nailed down enough to say which 2 that opposed expansion. Now, this was before this in Colorado, but that were good to stay at 10 if that was what it was going to end up being. And it has to be an 8-2 vote, so you can't have any more than those 2 oppose it. And ideally, you'd want it to be unanimous. So, first step is getting those 2 off that ledge. You would logically think, okay, we're not going to stay at 9, but who knows? And then which schools? And SMU and San Diego State have been the 2 most talked about, most logical. From an athletic standpoint, I mean, San Diego State in some ways you could argue is an upgrade from Colorado. They're just in the national championship game in basketball. They have had, they've had a much better football program during this time, but it's not just about athletics, as you know. And these presidents, and I think Pac-12 presidents are the most ivory tower of any of them. And they might just say, San Diego State's not good enough school. Sorry. So hopefully common sense prevails for their sake, because they need to do what the Big 12 did. The Big 12 said could have just added 2, but they said, no, we're going to add even more because we don't want to go through this again where we'll leave and the conference might fall apart. So it'll be very interesting. There was a statement from the Pac-12 after their meetings last night that again reiterated the sequences, media deal, then expansion. That doesn't mean it wouldn't. No, maybe it happens within hours. I don't know, but that continues to be their stance.
Do you think, especially after last week, it was very confusing what George Kliavkoff was saying about we're not going to announce the media deal because we want to focus on football, which always confused me because, George, no one is going to ask you how Lincoln Riley's defense is going to be. You won't have to answer that question all day today. You can steer clear of worrying about breaking down their transfers and all that. That's not why you're here. But do you think that there is a deal on the table that they could take right now and they're trying to fine-tune it, or do you think that there's a deal close to the table in their estimation?
I honestly don't know, and nobody else knows. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have kept such a tight circle on this. Now maybe it's expanding right now because of the situation. I was told that when George Kliavkoff meets with these TV partners about these negotiations, there's only one other person from the conference in the room. Yeah, there have been times I've asked ADs and they just say, nobody's told us. We don't know. So, look at the fact that let's say it's days or weeks away, you would think somebody somewhere would know, oh, ESPN's a part of it or NBC's a part of it or so on and so forth. Nobody's got anything. Now, maybe I'll look like an idiot again. Somebody will report in the next hour, this network and this network. But I don't know. I mean, they just keep saying a couple weeks away, but they've been saying a couple weeks away since March. So I mean, at this point though, I feel like there's a bit of a race against time. Like Arizona's president in particular, from what I've been told, has been probably the most patient of anybody and has been an advocate of, let's wait longer and see what other offers we might get. But now he's facing a decision. And I just don't think you can continue to drag this on. If it's really going to take weeks, I think that's a big problem for them.
Stewart, it wasn't, but I guess a few months ago when George Kliavkoff was talking about the power of Prime and, the appeal of the Colorado brand and how Prime could affect ratings. How much do you just factor in Deion and this whole Colorado move and his sway in their ultimate decision?
Well, there's no question that Deion, being a Texas guy, would rather be in the Big 12. He's never come out and said that. But I think, in talking to people around there, like that's a given. Of course, he's not the president, right? So he doesn't get to single-handedly make that decision, but I'm sure it was taken into account. The interesting thing about this whole situation is that imagine if we had, said a year ago that the Big 12 was going to really want, of all programs, Colorado. I mean, they've been so bad for so long, and Deion has single-handedly made them attractive again. Of course, the question is, how long is Deion going to be? Well, first question is Deion actually going to win? He hasn't coached a game yet. He's certainly made a lot of headlines, but we don't actually know yet how he's going to do. And if he does do well, how long is he going to be there? Because that next TV deal, right, kicks in 2025. Will Deion still be the coach of Colorado at that point? Or will he have moved up to an SEC school? Like, who knows? But, it's certainly a big part of the equation for them right now. I think ultimately when you make these decisions, though, when a school joins a conference, you don't know who the football coach is going to be 5 years from now. You can't just, it's long-term decisions. And I think the reason this kind of made sense for both parties is we already know what it looks like when Colorado was in the Big 12. They were actually a really good program when they were in the Big 12. So you have some proof of concept there.
How quickly you said that they're racing against the clock? How quickly do you really think they've got to move to stave this off?
At the very least, and this is like worst case scenario, it has to happen before a football season. You can't have this dragging on. You want them to focus on football, you have to get this done. But I do think that the longer it goes, the more chance somebody's going to panic. We don't know, like, how close is it to even being sometimes people make it seem like at any moment George Kliavkoff could just say, "All right, we're done. This is the deal." Like there's there's people on the other side of the table that have to agree to it. But and by the way, those parties now have more leverage because they know the situation the Pac-12 is in. But yeah, I think I've been on the phone constantly this morning. I've heard everything from somebody thinks it'll be done by Tuesday to next few weeks. So sorry that doesn't narrow it down more.
No, that's about par for the course.
Yes. Yeah. It's close. It's close, I think is what we always say here. Yeah, it's close. So just, Stewart, what was there's obviously been this battle, these battle lines were drawn, and that's been the case over the last few months on social media, and you've seen it all, you've experienced it all. You talked about how, the freezing cold takes and all of that, but just what do you kind of make? Is this just all a result of survival mode for everybody and kind of seeing the writing on the wall with college football, TV slots, and the way things are shaping up moving forward? I mean, obviously there was the wild card that affected everything with the streaming side of things not being, just a money mill for everybody, just spending extravagantly on anything and everything, and that's hurt the Pac to some extent. But is this just a byproduct of the whole, I guess, evolving landscape of college athletics, college football broadcast in some ways?
It's been really surreal to watch how college football, at least on Twitter, and I realize Twitter is not necessarily the whole college football population, how everybody in the last 2 years has become obsessed with TV ratings, linear versus streaming. All of Twitter works for like a sports media consultancy. But you're absolutely right. It's because people realize how much conference realignment hinges on these things. And we have seen such, two huge changes with OUCC and USC, UCLA, the Pac-12, and everybody's worried about their future if you're not in one of those two conferences. So, you combine that with this is all happening at a time when the way we watch games is changing overnight. I mean, there's an NFL playoff game this coming year on Peacock, right? Mm-hmm. When did Peacock launch? Right? When did we even know that existed? I feel like it was like maybe last year or 2 years ago. It's changing that rapidly. So I think I totally understand if you're a fan, you're trying to wrap your head around all this, that you're suddenly becoming way more versed in streaming services and the economics of the business and all that. I'm still trying to figure it all out myself. It's a very unusual time. This season, by the way, will be a little bit of a peek into it, right? You're going to need Peacock if you want to watch certain Big Ten games, including a pretty good one early in the season. The changes are going to start to kick in this year. Next year, 2024, is when the SEC CBS game goes to ABC. The whole way we consume college football is kind of changing before our eyes.
Final thing from me, and I think from all of us here, if you would, and I know this is kind of just loose fantasy booking prediction, but based on all the things you've heard from your sources and just kind of eyeing the landscape and sort of knowing the way that the table's set at the moment, what do you think is the most realistic, positive outcome that the Pac can pull off moving forward? And what do you think also is the most realistic path that the Big 12 can pull off as far as all of these movements here over these, here in this near future? What do you think is the most ideal outcome that's realistic for either side?
I mean, I think one notable detail that's come out in probably the last 24 hours is that the Big 12 is not going to, it doesn't appear that the Big 12 just has like endless spots to keep expanding. I think now that they have Colorado, they need one more school. And that's good news for the Pac-12, because even if that one school is Arizona, there's not a destination for all the other schools to jump to. So, I think the best case scenario, obviously, for the Pac-12 is Arizona stays, they add 1-2 more schools, and move on with their life. But even if Arizona leaves, as much as that seems like an absolute dire scenario, you're going to have 8 teams. You could add 2 more. You could add 4 more. The conference isn't going to vanish. It's not going to be nearly as attractive a conference as it used to be. But it's not like if you're Oregon State, who put out that ridiculous statement today that they're committed to the Pac-12 as if they have any other choice, like you don't necessarily have to worry that we're gonna have to go to the Mountain West. It's just going to be a very diminished. Still be what we consider a Power 5 conference, just a diminished Power 5 conference. And if you're the Big 12, I mean that kind of depends on who. If you gave George Kliavkoff a truth serum, I think he would love to have UConn and Gonzaga more than Colorado. But, let's being realistic, football drives the bus way more than basketball. So, I think that the most, the cleanest thing for them is that Arizona does come, and you've got now two kind of natural geographic partners, and he kind of achieves his goal, right? He said all along he wants to be in all 4 time zones. Arizona, by the way, is only in that time zone half the year, but it still counts.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, just because they've figured out that daylight savings time is stupid before all the rest of us doesn't mean we have to get rid of it. Well, Stewart, thank you so much for hopping on. I know that we had to move it because yesterday you were scheduled for during the time the news was happening. So
right when they voted on it. Yeah.
That was quick, too, wasn't it? I mean, that was not like any messing around. That was like, hey, we're going to the Big 12, all in favor, boom, and they were out there in like 15 minutes, it felt like.
You could tell that the meeting they'd had the day before is where they actually talked about all this stuff. It was already clearly done.
All right, Stewart, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the summer before the season hits. But really, you're probably working nonstop because we have no idea where the next domino is going to fall from.
Yeah. Whenever anybody says, what do you do in the off season? I hate that question. This is what we do in the off season.
Yeah, absolutely. Stewart Mandel of The Athletic, thank you so much. So here on 365 Sports. Coming up next.